SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Tired of your old tractor crying when it sees a hill? Or coughing more than Uncle Earl in pollen season? Trade up now at Sid's Trading Company. Coyote and TYM tractors so mean, they'd plow a cornfield in reverse. Uphill. Get her did at Sid's. SidsTrading.com.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. Middays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Middays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Well studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
All right, looks like the airport situation is starting to improve a bit. I saw some video this morning of Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport. That, of course, the busiest in these United States. And we went from like 4-hour waits reported there and at Houston's Intercontinental Airport and several others across the country. But the president says, the heck with that. And he deployed, you know this, he deployed ICE agents. And the Democrats are flipping out. He also wanted us to know it was his idea. It was his idea to mobilize ICE. Now he's talking about bringing in the National Guard to help out. And, of course, the Democrats are freaking out and promoting, as they always do, these fears, trying to instill fear into traveling Americans that they're going to be harassed by ICE and all this sort of stuff. Really is terrible. In the meantime, it doesn't look like we're getting too much closer to resolving this situation up in Washington with respect to the funding of the Department of Homeland Security. That is a bill that also incorporates funding for ICE and TSA. And while I know a lot of people say, wait, I thought all that was hammered out in the one big beautiful bill last year. It absolutely was from a proposed approved budgetary amount perspective, but the Congress still has to appropriate. Even though that's been carved out in law, Congress still has to appropriate. They have to appropriate in accordance with that law. But that action yet has to be completed, so that means it's got to get through the House, which it has, and it's stalled in the United States Senate, and that's where it would have to gain total approval before it would make its way to the president's desk for signature into law. Now, senators are discussing a proposal to end this stalemate. Have you seen this, Rhino? It's creative, I guess you could call it, but that's the old sausage making. Some Republican senators went to meet with the president yesterday to talk through some options that might break the log jam. And, of course, Chuck Schumer, isn't he something? Jeez. He may be the most obstinate, is a nice way to put it, member of the United States Senate. And so what they're talking about, or perhaps taking some steps that would involve excluding funding for the enforcement and removal operations. Now, those are core to the president's deportation agenda. So it's like, well, let's fund the Department of Homeland Security, which, of course, includes ICE, but let's not fund, how do you even do that? Let's not fund the assets, the resources that are mobilized to round up illegals in cities and then deport them. Also, looks like the Republicans are warming up to the idea of requiring officers to wear body cameras and carry identification. That's something the Democrats want. Republicans are talking to the president about this. So there's a lot of different options that are on the table. Senator Katie Britt of Alabama is serving as one of the chief negotiators with the president. Said, quote, this was yesterday, "I'm going to be working through the night." That's after she returned from the White House. And she said, "I hope we have a solution quick to," quote, no pun intended here, "land this plane." Senator Chris Coons, isn't he something? The Democrat.
To translate that from politician speak into normal language, her interns are going to be up all night.
That's exactly.
And she hopes to get credit for it.
Touché, my friend. That's how they roll up there, isn't it?
To paraphrase President Trump, we're not sending our best to D.C.
That's a good point. Senator Chris Coons, the Democrat from the great state of Delaware, he's part of this group that has been meeting with the president at the White House and said his understanding was that, quote, "there's a sense of urgency coming from the dog. You got to get up pretty early in the morning to get one over on that guy, don't you?" Gosh. He said from no money at all, the options are from no money whatsoever for ICE, which is what the Democrats want, to completely defund, disband, dismantle, isn't that one of their favorite words? The ICE operation altogether, to no restraints whatsoever on their operations, to fully fund it, but with some constraints. So they're going through all these various scenarios, these various options, trying to hammer out a deal and get the TSA back in the airports. Now, a bunch of people have already resigned from the agency, and there are problems nationwide. Is it just me, or does it feel like the Democrats place a higher priority on illegals in this country and ensuring that they stay here and suck up resources than they are American travelers? Am I reading that wrong, or it sure seems like it to me? And unfortunately, however, this is what I believe. Each side wants the public, the voting public in particular, to blame the other. Here's what I believe. Just looking at the polls, they just blame the whole dang Congress. They really don't. You believe? You agree? They don't care. They really don't. I don't care. I'm in line for 4 hours. I don't care. You guys are pathetic. We send you to Washington to get stuff done. The last thing we want is you doing something dumb like this, not funding a critical part of our economy and just our lives. We travel on airplanes. It's pretty good. It's a lot quicker than driving. It's not anything new here. And you're screwing it up. And I really think it just solidifies the opinion, the low opinion Americans have of Congress. That's what's going on. But, man, both sides are counting on the other to take the hit for this. I don't see it. You know what Schumer said? We ain't doing it with respect to the SAVE Act pivoting. So we got two major issues going on in Washington and a lot of stuff going on here at home as well. We got Michael Borkey. He's the host of SportsTalk Mississippi. He's going to join MidDays in the next segment to talk about the NIL tax exemption, which failed, as you guys know, this session. And then Senator Jeremy England. He'll come in the Element Well studio and give us his update from the legislative session as well. Yesterday, I thought we had a rather interesting and spirited conversation with a couple of independent pharmacists, and I really do appreciate them coming in. We kept them for 3 segments yesterday to discuss that issue, that one being the pharmacy benefit managers' reforms that have been ping-ponged down there at the Capitol. You informed our audience, of course, that the special procession to transmit that legislation has started in the House down to the Senate, was done, what'd you say, 5 steps?
Yeah, 5 steps at a time, count it out loud.
Which is the way that pharmacists, they peel off the tablets, the pills, and so forth when they're filling a prescription, right?
Yeah, usually
use a little
count
trays,
by 5s.
Have the little knife that sweeps it in, 5.
Some do it by 3, some do it by 4, some do it by 10, but the majority by 5.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty straightforward when we count by 5s, right? The old markers and stuff. So, well, it went down to the Senate, it got amended, and it got sent back. I'm going to share in the program, we got Michael Borkey coming in next, but at some point, what I'd like to see them do. And by the way, I communicated this to them, this idea to them. It's nothing huge. After the show yesterday, coming right back in the Element Well studio with a host of Sports Talk, Michael Borkey.
Hey, this is Bob, and if you're like me...
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
We're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Very appropriate there, Rhino. We're back with you in the Element Well studio. It's our great pleasure to welcome now Michael Borkey, the host of Sports Talk Mississippi. What's going on there, Michael?
It's early. That's what's going on.
You had to crawl out of bed for this one.
I mean, unbelievable. But no, it's great to be here. A lot going on. You told me before that there are people milking cows at the Capitol right now, and
House versus Senate cow milking contest, I think sponsored by the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. And I think that's because it is National Dairy Day. Did I get that right? That's something like
National Ag
Day. Pardon me. Okay, well, dairy's part of ag. So National Agriculture Day.
They got tractor races coming after.
Oh, okay, at the Capitol.
I'm wondering, do they have tractor races coming after that?
Cool.
I mean, that would be really something. We don't want to see them milking cows. Get those men and women on top of a tractor and see how fast they can go.
I got to tell you, I'm dying to know who the participants are. Now, I know we got Senator Andy Berry. He's a cattleman. And I think Senator Tyler McCon, right, Rhino, is also involved in that industry.
I'd rather the people with no experience whatsoever, to be honest with you. Give me the people that don't know what they're doing now.
I'm totally down for that.
Although I don't know if the legislature's real happy with us on Sports Talk lately. We haven't heard because of our stance on the NIL bill. That
the Senate's happy,
shot down.
But
they
the House
should be.
didn't.
Yeah, that was something, wasn't it? I've talked about this with Ricky on the coast, and I told him the same thing I'm about to tell you. I'd be willing to bet the people that wrote that bill, and if you're listening and you don't know what we're talking about, they attempted to exempt the college athletes' NIL deals from state income tax. And I have a feeling the people that wrote that looked at it and thought it would be an easy win. They're going to win a press release, and everybody in the state, because we love sports so much, is going to get on board, and heck yeah, thank you for making it easier for us to recruit or whatever. We got thousands of messages into the show about it. I cannot remember seeing a single one that was for it. I'd be willing to bet they did not think that was going to be the response statewide.
No, I think you're right about that. I think you're right about that. So, but I will say this. I've heard legislators say that everyone who earns income should pay income taxes, but they don't. There are more tax returns filed in the state of Mississippi without paying any income tax than there are tax returns that are filed that do pay income tax.
Yeah, that's a problem that's above my pay grade. But I pay taxes for what it's worth. So.
But if you have retirement income, for example, that's earned income. You don't pay income taxes.
Mississippi got my money.
Yeah, and if you don't make enough money, you don't pay income taxes.
And so they were trying to do the opposite. You make so much money, and you're still not going to pay income taxes. And look, I get it. I get that sports matter in this state a lot. I mean, for baseball weekends around here, the three big college towns get an influx of people that they wouldn't get without sports. And obviously businesses benefit. And my gosh, ask Oxford and the surrounding area what last football season did for them. Hosting a playoff game did for them. It does matter. But I have not heard, and this is what I would ask them if they try to bring this up again. Can you give me one example of a player that said no to Ole Miss or Mississippi State because of the state income tax?
Well, I think you're right. But if Mississippi becomes, and this is where I think we're headed, by the way, it's my opinion only. We're going to be the only state in the SEC that does tax NIL income. I think that's where we're headed.
If that day comes and the conversation does change.
Okay. So. Well, you know, Arkansas just did that, right?
Did they push it through?
Yes.
And then you've got
Alabama
Tennessee,
and Louisiana
Florida, and Texas without state income tax.
And Alabama and Louisiana are pursuing it. And Georgia will fall in line, and so will South Carolina, Missouri, and Oklahoma.
Don't put anything past Louisiana to get anything through.
100%.
Politics are obviously not my thing, but I know that we are headed towards eliminating it altogether. And so,
that's right. 14 years. That's how long it's going to take.
Why not 4? Why not 1? And that
we don't
that's
have enough time to talk into that.
But so our stance was simply put: if it's coming, then it's coming, and then the athletes can. They can benefit when we benefit, when the teachers, the farmers, everybody else. When that day comes for me, it'll be great for Trinidad Chambliss and his $5.5 million to also be tax-free, but not a second sooner.
What about sales taxes? You pay sales taxes, don't you?
On every purchase.
Yeah. You know, there's some that are exempt or have a much lower rate.
What are they?
Farmers.
I'll take that. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
We can really get into the weeds. I'm a young parent. You're a parent yourself.
Yeah.
Why don't we look into diapers, formula, that kind of stuff,
too.
To reduce the sales tax on those? If we're talking,
I'm for that too.
And if we're talking about reducing taxes on things instead of the athletes, why aren't we focused on stuff like that? That's kind of where I fell on it, and our audience largely.
I get it.
You don't form opinions to get your audience to agree with you. You form your opinions, but our audience largely agreed with that. Now, I was surprised myself at how against it everybody was, regardless of what the benefits would be in recruiting and otherwise. Because, you've got basketball players with 7-figure deals.
It's just crazy.
What's 4% of $1 million? That's a lot of money.
I feel like that a lot of this is just the frustration associated with very young people making a whole bunch of money, more people than a lot of folks in our state in particular who earn in their entire lives. Mm-hmm. And I think there's just a lot of, I don't want to say resentment or jealousy, but I think there's that's crazy. It's an 18-year-old or 19-year-old. They're making $5 million.
And we do have, now these are very unique examples in sports. Like Christian Pulisic was a pro. Rhino will tell you was a pro at 16.
Yeah.
Suni Lee was an Olympic gymnast at 16.
Yeah.
But those are the rare exceptions. Those are not common situations. Those are outliers for sure. What I think needs to happen, and what would make it more palatable for people, is if you had a structure like the NFL, and we rant about this all the time because the NFL has a collective bargaining agreement. That's how they can have rules. But Tyler Shuck, the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, is going to make in salary half of what the quarterback at Ole Miss is going to make this season.
That sounds crazy.
Because the NFL structures it where rookies can't make big money right away. You have to go out there and earn it. And in college sports, now Trinidad's a little bit of a different example because he went out there and earned it, right? He went from Ferris State to a backup salary, and then he blew up. And so that's a little bit different, but when you've got incoming recruits like Bryce Underwood at Michigan, before he took a snap at Michigan, he had only played high school football, $3 million plus a year deal. And look, he looks good, but that's rear end backwards to me. Is you're giving big contracts to people that have not earned it yet.
Yeah.
Whereas in the NFL, Tyler Shuck has to earn it for 5 years. Well, probably 4. The Saints are going to get out ahead of it if he keeps playing well, but he's got to earn it for years before he actually goes and gets that second contract.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen the exorbitant salaries that just announced for the coming season for MLB players. $576 million.
A lockout's coming
for the top 10. And Ohtani's $120 million of that. $120 million a year. Yeah. That's more than any CEO in America, by the way.
Baseball without a salary cap there is. I hope this is not true because baseball's on an upward trajectory. More people are watching baseball this year than they did last year than the year before. Baseball is recovering from a pretty significant slide in viewership and attention. It's on the way back up. The World Baseball Classic's really going to help that as well. I hope that they figure it out before they have some kind of a lockout because people will they'll find something else to be interested in. But that's a thing that baseball does not have that the NFL has, that the NBA has, although they have tax aprons and stuff. It's very complicated in basketball. They have a salary cap. But the Dodgers spend more on one player than the Marlins or the A's spend on their entire roster. And you're going to have forever a competitive imbalance because one owner is richer than the other.
Yeah.
In the NFL, I mean, the Raiders, now they're not very well run, and that's their problem, but they have the poorest owner in the NFL. But they have the same spending power as the Cowboys, who have the biggest brand in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that's why that league works so well. All you need is competency, and you can do anything as long as you're competent. Major League Baseball doesn't have that. If you have a more willing to spend owner, then you can build a better roster. Same thing in college sports. Now, right now, it's more level than it was before because Indiana just won the national championship. They haven't been good in ever. They've never been good. Yeah. Ole Miss just made the Final Four. Ole Miss hasn't been this good in football since before my father was born. So there's that that's helping, but that's temporary. I think that's temporary, and so that's why a cap is talked about so much and so important because if you actually can have one, it's across the board more beneficial for the sport. That's why the NFL has exploded the way it has because everybody can win.
Well, hang around. We keep talking.
Sure.
You good?
Yeah,
Michael
absolutely.
Borkey, host of SportsTalk Mississippi, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi, is our guest in the Element Wealth studio. We're coming right back.
It's time for Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Another great tune there that's appropriate for our guest. It's Michael Borkey, the host of Sports Talk Mississippi. So we started out talking about the NIL situation, and I saw it as well. There was huge objection across the state, and I think that was unanticipated. I think you hit that spot on. Representative Jonathan McMillan, the principal author, if he may be the only sponsor of the legislation, it caught him off guard. I talked to him about it. He didn't expect it, and he went through his rationale and his reasoning. But
it's sound and logic.
Yeah, it does. But
it wasn't nefarious. It wasn't.
No, not whatsoever. You can't suggest that. And he didn't personally benefit or anything like that. He just thought it was something the state needed to do to remain competitive with the states that don't have an income tax, those that, at least Arkansas, has passed legislation that also eliminates NIL from taxation, and then others are pursuing it.
Eventually,
we'll probably have to visit it again.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you're starting to see it trickle out. There's been conversations for a long time behind the scenes about whether or not the SEC and the Big Ten should break away from the NCAA and bring a few with them. you're starting to see that conversation leak out a little bit, where they're having meetings and the content of the meetings is starting to get leaked to the media, and it's centered around that. You can't collectively bargain with 130 schools in just football, and all of those players, and they all have different financial thresholds, and it's a disaster. But you know how much easier it would be to collectively bargain with 50 football teams instead of 360 football and basketball teams?
Sure.
It's totally different. So that day's coming probably sooner than everybody thinks it is, because they're starting to seriously have those conversations. And so that might make all of this moot at that point.
I mean, that's the larger question. Have you heard anybody say in your circles or just in your hosting, man, I really like this whole NIL program, this free-for-all that we have?
Well, it has benefited Ole Miss. So Ole Miss fans have been okay. But there's a longevity component to it, just how much longer can you invest the way you're investing. Basketball teams are costing $10+ million a year. And that's all coming from, I say all, about $15 to $20 million are coming now from the schools. It's a new phenomenon. But the rest is coming from you listening. Yeah. It's coming from the people. And how much longer will they have an appetite of that? Nobody. I mean, you buy season tickets and stuff, but there's no donate here so Tyler Shuck can have money for the New Orleans Saints. It's, when you buy tickets, you get something. You get access to the game. But then there's this other thing where it's give money here or else you're not a good fan. That doesn't happen in any other sport.
No, you're right. But,
that day's going to come.
I would argue that money in the NIL program that I think does aggravate some fans.
Oh, yeah.
But I would say that's second to the portal.
That's incredibly frustrating. See, and especially, most people agree with the concept that if you're an adult, you should be able to make as much money as somebody's willing to pay you. I'm sure you see in the political circles that there are some people that think that nobody should make more than anybody else.
100%.
But, largely, the average person thinks that you, a legal adult, should be able to make whatever somebody's willing to pay you. That doesn't really bother people. It's every 6 months they can leverage and hey, I'm going to leave now, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you pay me more money, whereas every other professional sport has contract lengths and things like that. So that's something that they've got to figure out. I think the breakaway will help make that happen, because the Supreme Court has ruled against the NCAA 9-0 when it comes to that. They hate the NCAA model. You're not going to restrict them. So you've got to do it with them having a seat at the table. That day's coming soon. Greg Sankey will talk about it at Media Days. We'll be there. We'll ask him about it. The dam is about to break, and they need to get out ahead of it. And they're starting to have those conversations, but it better not be too late.
So it feels like that even if college were governed the way free agency works in the professional ranks, where there's some limits, right, on the transferring around, it's just a free-for-all right now. It's a
constant. And the thing is, when you go through free agency in the NFL, Travis Etienne has a multi-year contract with the Saints. So when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
Right? But with Ole Miss, for example, they in state brought in this transfer portal class. Those same guys can do it again next year. And there's nothing you can do about it. They're completely stuck and locked in.
The landscape of recruiting has been completely upended. Would you agree? It went from really competing for these star high school athletes to some programs, such as Ole Miss, spending and investing more of their recruiting cycles on trying to get good players that are kind of lost in the shuffle or might have an interest in coming that are elsewhere.
And there's still value. This is a really interesting conversation, because there's still value in high school recruiting, especially in states like this one. Because if you look at the players the best players that are returning for Ole Miss and for Mississippi State, you've got for state, you've got Kelly Jones, the defensive back. If he wasn't from Mississippi, would he have stayed? Maybe not. I don't know. Would Centurion Perkins have stayed at Ole Miss? Will Eccles was offered a lot more money by multiple other schools. Isaac Smith was offered a lot more money from other schools, but they stayed because, one, not every player leaves, but I think that there is a local component to they don't want to leave where they're from. They've got family here, all this stuff. They've established roots in this place, and that doesn't apply to every player.
Yeah.
But I think you're seeing Pete Golding in particular. He's hiring a staff that is going to emphasize high school recruiting more, because I think you have evidence to prove those guys are less likely to leave.
I think that's right.
If Caleb Cunningham, who he's a 5-star wide receiver out of high school, he has 1 catch for Ole Miss so far. He showed up, and some guys just aren't ready, and they also had a really talented receiver room. If he was from Tampa, he'd be gone by now. But he waited his turn in part because this is home, and now he's going to get rewarded for it. He's going to play a lot this year. But I think that high school recruiting still matters, but it's going to have to be like the emotional side of it, I think, is still going to play because you look at these 2 rosters. Again, Eccles could have left Ole Miss for more money, chose not to. Cam Franklin could have left Ole Miss for more money. He chose to stay. Centarian Perkins chose to stay. Isaac Smith chose to stay. Kelly Jones chose to stay. Those guys are all from Mississippi, and I think that tells you something.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It just seems like that just the entire discipline of recruiting, you end up being more of a financial negotiator than anything else. And used to be you sold the program and its legacy and facilities and academic opportunities and coaches, and that's like secondary now.
You still got to build relationships and stuff, but that's why Lane Kiffin is so good in the transfer portal. He did not effort high school recruiting. Well, we've heard from a lot of high school coaches in the state that in the 6 years he was at Ole Miss didn't have a conversation with him. I mean, there was no relationship effort built, but portal recruiting is very transactional. It's you have 1 year left, here's your financial offer, and then here's my system and how you fit. And a guy like him could really work in that because despite him going to Mardi Gras parades and stuff, he is not good in social settings. But he's very good on a whiteboard, and here's your contract, here's how you will fit in my offense, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
And
reports
that
about
works for him.
Yeah, that's right. So Michael Borkey, the host of SportsTalk Mississippi, is our guest. So do you think that we should just drop the term student athlete?
Yes, I do. When it comes to, frankly, baseball also is getting to that point, but not across the board. High Point, who... they got a nice win in the NCAA tournament. They beat Wisconsin, the 12-5 upset. It's a $4 million roster. High Point. High Point. Now, High Point is probably a little bit different than most because it is that's a very wealthy school. Yeah. Beautiful campus if you've ever seen it. But High Point is a professional basketball team. So that's what I keep.
I had no idea. $4 million.
$4 million roster.
And the guy that hit the winning shot first two-pointer of the
season. Yeah, really fun story. But no, your football team, they still go to class. Yeah, they still get degrees. They have a job, and their job is to play football. The basketball team has a job, and their job is to play football. And they just have to make sure they stay.
It's entertainment.
And that's what it is.
They're entertainers.
And, to be honest with you, that doesn't bother me because they're filling up big stadiums. Yeah. Millions of people are watching.
A lot of income.
ESPN's given the conference a multi-billion-dollar television deal. That part of it doesn't bother me near as much as it does other people. I just wish that we would drop that charade and do what's necessary to create rules. Because if they played at the school, but they were professionals, as long as they wore the helmet and the uniform, played in the same stadium, and the fight song played, and there were rules and structure, people wouldn't care whether or not they were getting a Bachelor of Arts and whatever degree.
Well, you don't see much emphasis or highlighting or boasting about the academic performance of athletes anymore. Well, we got to go, but I got a theory before we go. Is that ultimately this whole deal is going to be privatized. And I've had that theory for about 10 years now.
They're working on it.
We're edging ever closer to that, are we not?
You
might won't even be students, is my belief.
Stop, and they have to stop treating the golfer and the tennis player the same as the quarterback. Just stop that. They're not the same. Don't treat them the same, and then maybe we can actually get a rule or two that's enforceable. Hopefully that day comes.
Right now, it's just fairly chaotic, I think is one way to put it. Michael Borkey, host of Sports Talk Mississippi, has been our guest in the Element Well studio. Thanks for coming in early.
Of course, anytime.
To get your day going. Yeah. We're coming right back, folks. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great conversation there. Appreciate Michael Borkey, host of SportsTalk Mississippi, coming in. It's certainly not popular, and I think with the public in the state of Mississippi, I think what people want to see is some tax relief in their pockets, especially nowadays when we're fighting, still suffering the effects of the Biden transitory inflation, which is transition to being permanent. We're still fighting that, and I think people are looking for government to provide some relief. Now, you guys know we passed legislation last year to eliminate the income tax. However, that's over a very long period of time, 14 years to be exact. The income tax rate currently in the state of Mississippi, a flat 4% on all taxable income over $10,000. If you make $18,000 and change in the state of Mississippi as an individual, you got no tax liability. And double that for married, filing joint. No tax liability. I think folks would be surprised. I actually dug into this on the Department of Revenue's published information. How many people in the state of Mississippi do file tax returns that don't have a tax liability because of those circumstances? And that is an indicator of the low income in the state of Mississippi, 50th in the nation, unfortunately, in household income and per capita income, have been in the position of 50th since 1929 when the Census Bureau began counting those statistics. And I also did a little math to see, okay, well, if you adjusted that for our cost of living, where does that put us? Unfortunately, still 50th. So we got work to do there. And I think that we're headed in the right direction. There have been some significant economic development wins and good policy, such as eliminating the income tax, that I think will boost household incomes in the state. But we also have got to keep in mind that right now the largest industry in our state accounts for 8 to 10% of total state GDP, and that's agriculture. Those guys are suffering. They're really having a difficult time. The cattle farmers are not. You know about that. They're elevated prices of beef. And the price of agricultural commodities is subject to market trading, markets in general. It is not something that they can set. They can't say, well, I'm only going to sell my product for this much. They can certainly shop it and try, but in general, what they sell, beans and cotton and corn and other agricultural row crop output, as well as poultry and beef as well, and all agricultural products, those are all subject, just like oil, to, in this case, national markets. And so they don't really have any power over that. Right now, the prices of some of those products are depressed relative to the cost of inputs. Tariffs have had an impact negatively on the cost of inputs. Farm equipment and machinery, fertilizer now with the cost of fuel, and then right now the present cost of diesel. Right, I believe over $5 a gallon, right? And let's hope that the price of oil continues to drop as it did yesterday. It's up today. That's just because oil traders, commodities futures traders for oil and gas are still not sold on everything getting back to normal in the short term. If you look at futures out into the fall and into the December time frame, yeah, they look pretty good. They're down close to where they were before the attack started. But at this point, they're elevated, and that is causing problems. So I'm just sharing that I have concerns for our farmers, a critical industry in our state. Not only that, they produce the food that we need to survive as humans. And so we were talking in the last segment about the reduced sales tax on purchase of many of the farm commodities and even operational commodities, but also capital equipment expenses and investments as well. And, of course, that all figures into the cost of input. So, thankfully, they still have a little relief in the state of Mississippi based on law that was enacted many years ago. Because if that weren't the case, the cost of what we buy that's made of agricultural products would be higher. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio after Fox News and SuperTalk News, Senator Jeremy England at 12:05.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth studio. Once again, thanks to Michael Borkey for joining us here in the Element Wealth studio. We've got some tickets to give away later on in the program to the Doobie Brothers. They're coming to Brandon in October of this year. And tomorrow, we got an all-day remote situation. Mornings with Richard Cross, Middays with Gerard Gibert, and Sports Talk Mississippi will be broadcasting at the Columbus Marina tomorrow as the Bassmaster Elite Series comes to town. The Bassmaster Elite Series is the highest level of professional bass fishing tournaments, and it's happening in Columbus this weekend. Brought to you by Visit Columbus, the City of Columbus, and the Tennessee Tom Bigby Waterway Authority. For more info, go to bassmaster.visitcolumbus.org. The C Spire text line is wide open, 601-879-4395. So, wanted you guys to know that after yesterday's discussion with a couple of pharmacists, independent pharmacists here in the Element Wealth studio, robust discussion, I would say, Rhino, that I thought about it and said, it'd be great if we could just get maybe them again or one of the two individuals that joined us yesterday, and perhaps John McKay with the Mississippi Business Alliance. They've taken a position, as you know, Rhino, against the amended bill 1665, amended by the Senate. They are advocating for the House not to concur with that measure, would prefer to return it to its original state as transmitted by the House. That's your understanding as well. You're shaking your head. Transmitted, of course, in accordance with your prescription for the procession, the 5-step, right? So, but that's what they've said. On the other hand, you got the independent pharmacists who say, no, we want you to concur there. You just heard the ad on our air with pharmacists that are wanting the House to concur with the Senate bill as amended. Now, at this point, it's fair to say, Rhino, three different things can happen. Three options. Make sure I got this right. This is where the old phrase dead comes from. The House can concur, in which case it gets sent to the governor. The House can invite conference, in which case the House and Senate would appoint members to do just that, confer, discuss the measure, and come out with a conference report. Or it could get killed altogether in conference. And then the other option is it just sits there. It dies on the calendar. All of those are potential prospective options. Honestly, I don't even know how to estimate. I wouldn't know where to begin on where this is going. So I extended an invitation to one of those pharmacists and John McKay from the Mississippi Business Alliance to come talk to us about this. I just felt like it was a good idea to get them together. They represent two different positions on this matter. And maybe we could have a civil, respectful, robust discussion right here in the Element Well studio about this issue and perhaps make some progress. And I understand at this point they felt that it would be better just to let the thing play out the way it is right now through the legislature, and that's fine. No big deal whatsoever, and completely respect their position on that. Was just trying to maybe intercede a little bit as a moderator to try to move this thing forward. It's super complicated. I will share with you, however, what I think, and I sent this, by the way, to a few people involved in this, including a couple of independent pharmacists. This is what I think would help understand the consequences, the impact of this bill, because it's clear the pharmacists are passionate about we got to have the Senate amended version. And the thing that is a bit confusing, make sure I describe this correctly, Rhino, is that there is a dispensing fee that's added, but also adoption of the NADAC price model, which they indicate is lower than the other models, and would standardize that, the cost, if you will, at a lower level, and then add the dispensing fee, that the net of that is less than using the other models without a dispensing fee. Is that your understanding, Rhino? Okay. Just want to make sure I got that right. So here's what I suggested. And you tell me if this is even practical, Rhino, because I know you understand a lot about that industry. But just thinking at it from a consumer perspective, instead of showing me all these charts and graphs with all these acronyms and all these numbers that honestly are confusing, I'm just going to say to the average person out there, I don't find those to be very effective. And that's what I indicated to them yesterday after the show. Why don't you just take 10 commonly dispensed prescribed drugs? Just take 10 and list those. Think about a plain old column or spreadsheet, 4 columns. First column, the drug. Second column, price to the patient. Don't give me all the insurance reimbursement and all the various costs. Just tell me what the typical patient pays for that drug today. And then in the adjacent column, what they pay should this bill pass as is. And then the difference. Show it in red or green if it's up or down. But I understand you'd have to do that, and this is what I suggested. Do it for Mississippi Medicaid. Do it for the state health plan. Do it for a couple of large employers. Do it for a couple of small employers. Maybe do it for someone that has coverage on the individual market, doesn't get their coverage through their employee. Just a simple chart. This is what it is today. It's what it would be tomorrow. I think that would be more effective. And at least explaining, because here's what people want. They want the independent pharmacists to be viable and to be available. I don't want to see pharmacy deserts in our state. I don't think anybody does. I don't want people to have to drive 80 miles to fill a $10 prescription. You know what would happen is they wouldn't do it. And then that causes all kinds of downstream problems. Not to mention they personally suffer and their health suffers. So I don't want that. But I don't want prices to go up for patients or businesses. So the businesses are saying, this is going to make our costs go up. And the pharmacists are saying, no, it's not. And I honestly don't know. And that's why I'm suggesting, why don't you put this chart together where we consumers can see what, and I've talked about this before just from my business experience, people want to know, what does this mean to me? I don't really care what it means to you. I care what it means to me. You agree?
Yeah. I think the only problem is you could set that all up and run it through whatever system they got to run it through to get the numbers. those numbers would change the very next day.
I know,
Likely
and I know
would
that.
change within an hour.
And that has always been a challenge in that industry, correct? That it's extremely dynamic, extremely volatile. And I understand that, but I will tell you that I have 2 prescriptions, and they've been like the same out-of-pocket cost to me for as long as I can remember that I've been taking.
Yeah, that's not unusual, but
okay.
the cost to the pharmacy or the reimbursement to the pharmacy likely changed every single time.
I don't doubt that, but I'll just say again, the consumers don't care about that. They just don't. They want you to be there, but they really don't do the second-order thinking, oh, you got to make enough money to actually be there, right? I actually remember in my business days talking to peers that said when they would be dealing with some of these really big companies selling IT solutions, that the companies would require them as a condition of even being in the running for the business, you got to show me your cost. Not because they wanted to see that you weren't making too much money. You know why? To make sure you were making enough money. Because they want you to be able to stay in business. Literally. No, you got to charge. Literally would tell them, you got to charge me more. You're not making enough money on that. I'm serious. Because, and I know, I'm not saying the pharmacists would do that. I'm just saying that consumers generally don't think like that. Big enterprises do when they've got these long-term relationships. And I'm not faulting consumers for this. They get it. They've got to deal with their own personal household, just like the pharmacists. They got to deal with theirs. Just like the big companies, they're accountable to the gazillions of stockholders. I don't think I got that point across yesterday. But they've got to be viable as well. So we got to figure out a way to make this work for everybody. That's, I think, what people want. Coming right back.
We've sent that Rip Van Winkle guy.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite!
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
A man walks down the street, he says, why am I soft in the middle now? Why am I soft in the middle? The rest of my life is so hard. I need a photo opportunity. I want a shot at redemption.
Welcome back, everyone. Middays from the Element Well studio. Talking earlier about the Democrats still holding up reopening the government fully because they won't fund the measure for the Department of Homeland Security, which incorporates the TSA, and that is wreaking havoc across the nation's airports, causing unbelievable delays, 3 and 4 hours at many of the country's busiest airports. And they just are insisting that without significant reforms to the ICE agency, they're not going to unblock and stand down and get out of the way and get on board. On the ceasefire text line, it seems to me like if we have to have a partial government shutdown because our elected officials can't do their job, then we should shut down the IRS. That is a burden to the American citizens, and keep the TSA open for protection of the American citizens. I'm all for defunding the IRS, just so you'll know. I'm down for that as well. Now, you should know that there are a couple of measures up there in the Congress that would suspend and withhold member pay, members of Congress, during the shutdown. No Pay for Congress During Default or Shutdown Act. That's a creative name there. You got Senators John Kennedy and Representative Brian Stile. They have sort of combined. You've got a Senate and a House resolution. Paychecks would be held in escrow during a shutdown and not dispersed until open. So you got Senator Rick Scott. This one is fairly new. I've seen him publish some videos about this. also withholding pay if Congress fails to pass regular appropriations bills. Looking right now, 240-minute wait at George Bush Intercontinental Airport. That seems to be the one that has had the longest waits of all the airports. That would be in Houston, of course. 240 minutes. Jeez, 4 hours. I'm looking at video of that right now. That's totally nonsense. So I'm for this. I wish the Congress would pass such a measure that would suspend pay. Maybe that would motivate them a little bit. It's just become clear, though, that the Democrats' concerns are more for illegal immigrants into this country and keeping them here and allowing them to enjoy and participate in the many taxpayer-funded benefits this country offers, as well as, of course, try to sneak them into the voting booth, all the above, that they're more concerned about that than they are the traveling public, those that are stuck in lines for 4 hours. Too bad. They don't care about that. But, again, I think the people in those lines, they don't see it as a Democrat or Republican issue. They just see it as a congressional issue, and they're not happy about it. And I think it just further illustrates the dysfunction of the United States Congress. The tax situation as well that we were talking about earlier, I was curious and did look that up. Talking about special waivers in the state of Mississippi for sales taxes. And these have been on the books, Rhino, for a long time. You remember the debate a couple of years ago of the measure coming out of the House. It would have eliminated the income tax in a fairly short period of time. And that was doable because it increased sales taxes. And it increased sales taxes, as I recall, across the board, like 1.5%. And that included on farmers and others who receive special sales tax exemptions, exempt from the full sales tax rate. Nonprofit entities, of course, including some hospitals, the Salvation Army, and schools, they're exempt totally. There's no surprise there. Sales directly to the U.S. government, state of Mississippi, or other public sector entities, of course, exempt. But sales of livestock, seeds, and fertilizer are exempt. And, of course, we could certainly debate whether or not that was the correct thing to do a long time ago to establish a carve-out. But here's the fact. If that weren't the case, your food would be more expensive. They'd have to pass that on somehow. And so I think that was the rationale for that policy, to keep the cost of food and the cost of other finished goods that are produced with agricultural inputs. That was the goal, and I think that is a good one. So sales and use tax exemption is available also for certain regional or national headquarters if they meet that definition under our law and have at least 20 employees, new jobs. I didn't know this, though. I found this one. Repairs to buildings and machinery damaged in a disaster declared by the governor. How about that? It makes sense. So those are some of the exemptions that are presently on the books for sales taxes. I just want to pass that on for your benefit, just for your knowledge there. I'm going to be headed to Tate County tonight, Senatobia, Mississippi. Looking forward to addressing the Tate County Republican Club. Should be fun. Landfill management, I think, with respect to the NIL income tax exemption, says, hell no. So I hear you, man. Thanks for letting us know. Brian in Madison says the NIL tax issue is a waste of time. Due to state taxes being reduced to zero, eventually they will not pay taxes, and until then they are not that much anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gerard. So, yeah, you're right, but it's going to take 14 years. So you still got 14 years of sports. So I think that's a little off, Brian. But you're right. It doesn't amount to a whole lot of money either to the individual or to the state. And I think that those involved in cutting these NIL deals on behalf of State and Ole Miss can sort of gross up, you heard Michael Borkey say that, to account for the income tax that they would pay in the state of Mississippi, which is relatively low. Based on the figures I saw estimated for total NIL pay this year, the amount of sales taxes paid by all of those NIL recipients totals to about $3.2 million. That's not a lot in a $7.1 billion budget. $7.1 billion last year. Not sure what it's going to look like next year with all this money they're spending down there at the Capitol. So John in Pontotoc says the less rules, the bigger schools with money won't follow them anyway. I hear you. He also said if the quarterback has independent market himself, he can do commercials. Yeah, that's true. And lots of opportunity. Paul and Meridian, we were talking about the cost of agricultural products and how fertilizer is affecting our agricultural industry. The cost is up, as well as the cost of diesel. He says, I paid $22 for a ribeye steak at the grocery yesterday. Sounds about right. Would that be $22 a pound, right, Paul? Isn't that about what it's going for, right? Something like that? I think it depends on where you shop and what grade you buy, right? But, yeah, it's elevated. Here's one. I voted for Trump, but the decision he has made it very difficult on farmers, not saying it was his intent, but it is very obvious. I think that the president felt that there would be more immediate positive benefit, the benefits that he seeks, which is reshoring manufacturing, as an example, and reducing our reliance on production of goods we consume here, that especially those which are critical. They're all critical, but I think it's fair to say, for example, semiconductors are more critical in certain precious metals than are tennis shoes. How about that? I would frame it that way. And drugs, another one. We learned about that during the COVID era. I think he felt like that landscape would have changed at a faster rate. Just takes a while for some of that. And honestly, the data shows that we didn't really expand manufacturing to any significance last year. In fact, we lost manufacturing jobs in this country overall last year. Hogman says government subsidies is why they grow these crops. You know, there's always been some questions about the injection of money from the federal government into the agriculture industry. I don't know that it's necessarily why they grow the crops, but the reference pricing is one of those programs. And anytime you hear them talk about the Farm Bill in general, that's what they're talking about, that, hey, when you go to sell your product on the market, if you don't get to a certain price, we'll make up the difference, so to speak. As I've said before, Rhino, these guys are just too good, man. Their yield is incredible, and we have fewer of them producing way more than ever, largely as a result of innovation, technology, just massive improvement in farming techniques and tactics and all the other inputs that are just producing lots of great yields. We are thankful to them, but they got to make money. They got to make money. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert. It is on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. Thank you so much for joining us. On the C Spire text line, hey, Gerard, did you say a couple of weeks ago on your show that there are a lot of federal judge positions currently open in the state of Mississippi? I don't recall saying that. I don't think there are anymore, Rhino. I think a couple got filled late last year, I believe, in the Northern District. seems to come to mind.
Yeah, as of this morning, there are 36 total federal judicial vacancies across the country with 8 nominees pending, but none of them are in Mississippi.
Okay. I thought that was taken care of. So appreciate you getting us that for us. So let's see if something else on the C Spire text line. Someone said, not surprised Business Alliance wouldn't come on air to speak with the independent pharmacist. So just to be clear, that's not what happened. The independent pharmacists never got back to us as well. We extended an invitation from both. I will tell you this. We did talk after the show with management here about this. That's when I suggested to them, hey, let's get them both on. And the decision was made. I don't mind sharing this. I don't think I'm talking out of school here, Rhino, that, you know what, we really, before there's something final about this matter, between now and it being final about this matter, we're only going to entertain guests on this issue, talking about the Business Alliance and the independent pharmacists, if they come on at the same time. That was the decision. And I think that makes sense because there's just conflicting information. And I'll be honest, I am unable to tell what is fact from fiction. And that's why I suggested to the pharmacists, if it's possible, and I know you point out that the costs are dynamic. They change. And I know that from working in that industry in the IT world, going back a long time ago, where, and you know this, you got stuff on the shelf that you bought at a certain input price, right? But the price could change while it's sitting on your shelf, and you could either make or lose money as a pharmacist based on adjusting to current price, right? Yeah, so that's back in the IT world, that's common. If you had inventory that was like in process, IBM kind of invented this because they invented the channel for IT. Before IBM invented the PC, if you want a computer, you had to buy it from the manufacturer. That's what was pivotal about the invention of the PC. Rhino, they had something called price protection. That's what they called it. So if you had systems on hand that you were preparing to sell to a customer, preparing for a customer, and between the time you bought it and the time you invoiced the customer, the price went down, which was common in IT products, right? Price went down, and the customer would say, hey, wait, look, the price went down. You're going to pass that on. Well, of course they would expect that. The manufacturer would protect you. They call it price protection. The pharmacy industry, it happens, as you indicated, daily on some of the drugs, right? It's daily updated. I don't remember. Maybe it was the NADAC database that sort of controlled that. But I do know that it's extremely dynamic and volatile, and it makes it difficult. But I think they could come up with something to say this is, in general, how it would affect these specific drugs, rather than talking and describing it at an extremely high level that I think is over the head of most people. When you get into the different pricing models and folks have concerns about, well, you're going to add that dispensing fee on. And what the pharmacist said yesterday, no, we're not. That's going to be absorbed. But I don't feel like I got a straight answer out of that. Where's that going? It's not just going to be tucked under the rug. And I get that, well, we may reduce it over here and add it over here, and the net of that's going to be a reduction or an increase. I get it. I understand. It's super complicated, and there are lots of different cost inputs, moving parts, et cetera. And then you got the third parties involved because you got insurance companies. Then you got the rebate situation. Then you got the manufacturers, and it's brutally complicated in many different components. But I just feel like something could be done to help consumers understand the impact to them at a more specific, precise level than at a very high level that has been the communications to point. I don't want to say it's vague. It's just somewhat theoretical rather than very specific and succinct. This drug to you in this circumstance is this much, and after this bill goes through, it's going to be this much. I just believe that's what people want to see and hear. God bless the legislators. They're trying to figure all that out to determine how to cast their vote. They got the business people saying, no, we don't want this one. The pharmacists are saying, yeah, you want that one. They're in a pickle as well. And hopefully they'll sort this out and get to something that we can all live with. Because we want to see those guys have stability, be stable, and be there to serve their customers. But we also want lower cost. I don't think that's a secret. By the way, California just converted their Medicaid and their state health plan to Mark Cuban's, what's he call it, Rhino, Cost Plus Pharmacy, his online pharmacy. They say it's going to save them $500 million by converting to that. And he is transparent about that. Look, here's the cost. Here's what we're selling it to you for. You know, it's a meager markup, honestly. He's not looking to make money at it. It's almost a philanthropy, honestly, a charity on his part. He's a billionaire. He can do it. It's not unlike Elon Musk, but did he aggravate the Democrats or what? When he said, I'll pay the TSA people. Oh, you're encroaching on the government's gig. You can't do that. By the way, pay more taxes. Do you see the hypocrisy of that? Because they don't get credit for it that way, right? They can't go back to their constituents. Look, I shook down those rich people. I took their money.
And they can't funnel any of it to their friends and family.
100%. I love it. I think it's great. This is a great example of something we talk about on this program all the time. Can we get the private and the public sector to work together more, like circumventing all the bureaucracy? We could get a lot of good stuff done. By the way, at the state level as well. Doesn't have to just be restricted to the federal level. On the ceasefire text line, we can't adjust the price. PBMs and insurance dictate that. I understand, agree. But you can at least help us understand, without this law, with this law, how else are we supposed to form a conclusion? How are we supposed to posit if we don't know, well, what does it mean to me? Well, I can't tell you. Well, then you just got to trust me, right? And both sides are saying that. That's my point. And I just think we need something more definitive, that's all, to form an opinion on. Jeff in Grenada says, I'm not a farmer, but we are in trouble if we get to the point that we need China to feed us. So if that means farm subsidies, so be it. Fair statement. Do all the TSA employees that are choosing not to come to work still get paid for the days they miss when they open the government back up? I believe so. It gets escrowed up to a point,
if they have
right?
sick days and vacation days to use, you're not allowed to just call out.
Yeah, that's right.
But also, if you do show up, you get paid for all those days you show up.
Yeah. Exactly. On the ceasefire text line, I guarantee the ones fighting no voter IDs have no problem showing it to get their food stamps and free or highly reduced housing. And if I were a woman, I'd be pissed that you include me in a group that can't figure out how to get an ID. This is not the 60s. Well, I think that needs a little nuanced analysis, Rhino. I don't think it's those people that are complaining about it. It's not the rank and file voters in America. It's the stupid, virtuous, condescending, signaling Democrats. I know better than you do. You can't get an ID because I said you can't. You're not smart enough, essentially. Or it's too onerous. It's too much of a hassle. It's, what do they call it? The soft bigotry of low expectations. That's on full display in this particular case. And they lie about it as well. They make you think that you got to show up at the ballot box with a stack of paper just to cast a ballot. No, you don't.
If a Democrat politician's lips are moving, you've got a pretty good chance they're lying to you.
On the ceasefire text line, Russ in Rankin says, I wanted to talk to you last night at Lance's. Yeah, the barn burner, Representative Lance Varner did a great job as fourth last night out in Rankin County, but couldn't get to you when we were both talking to others. This PBM fight is not going away, and civility is going to be tested big time. That I agree with. And that's why I wanted to get people together so we can maybe have a civil discussion. Coming right back. Stay with us.
Polyumpa, Mississippi.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. So, yeah, I think this PBM thing is going to continue. Yes, some other states have implemented some reforms, and yes, the independent pharmacists point to those as being successful. But I think we have to be honest that the folks in the Mississippi Business Alliance, which is a large number of businesses that are part of that organization, members of that organization that have expressed concerns about this, well, they didn't just fall off the turnip truck yesterday. These are some pretty smart people, as well as we read a letter last week. I don't remember the exact title of the individual, but involved in HR and benefits for the electric co-ops, which band together for their insurance, their health insurance. Not unusual to expand the pool and drive the price down. And I had a friend that said you'd have to go to total annual cost to the consumer. And he makes the point, and it does make sense. You know this, Rhino. Once you hit your deductible, you've got different types of insurance. And once you hit your deductible, your out-of-pocket cost may be zero to very little. You may have a copay. There are all kinds of different plans, and that's why, in circumstances, and I'm aware of that. That's why I'm suggesting let's see if we could get a couple of from the Mississippi Business Alliance, a couple of large employers, a couple of small employers, and just model it. Look at some of their actual employees. No names, of course. We don't want to disclose anyone's identity. Of course not. But you could take some real-world situations. You could even add another column or two. Once you've met your deductible, here's your out-of-pocket cost. And in some cases, you may still have a copay, as you know. So the entire dang health insurance industry, just from a financial perspective, we have to be honest here. It's just stupid complicated. And again, it's what we alluded to and shared yesterday. Only in the health care industry do you have multiple prices for the same service or product. In this case, the medicine is a product. And it can vary on any given day and at any given point in the year based on my friend's note here about how, once you exhaust your deductible, things change. And then you've got co-insurance as well that could figure into that. And co-pays. Deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance all refer to, of course, your out-of-pocket cost. You being the patient, the subscriber, the policy holder, if you will. Man, just unbelievably complicated. But, gosh, sure seems like we could come up with something that would be understandable and get close. I know it can't be perfect in just various scenarios so that people could be informed in a way that doesn't hurt their head with all these acronyms and all these calculations and all these various contrasts and comparisons. What is wrong with ordering pharmaceuticals from manufacturers and Amazon deliver? Well, nothing. And now you've got the Trump RX. There's absolutely nothing necessarily wrong with that, except keep in mind that you may have issues with your insurance, right, Rhino? Your top line insurer may say, nope, this is what we cover. You agree to that. And if you use a different route, it's no different than if you seek services from a physician, a medical services provider, healthcare professional that's not in the so-called network. Same problem. They may say, well, we'll cover that, but you got to file. And you got to wait for us to send you your money. In the meantime, you got to pay the provider. They may say, nope, we don't provide coverage for out-of-network. Right? You got all the above. That further illustrates my point of how convoluted this stuff has gotten. And by the way, that didn't just start with Obamacare. It did, however, greatly exacerbate it. We'd have to certainly acknowledge that. This sounds like mafia language. That's pretty good. Hogman said that. On pharmacy PBM, all you have to do is look at other states. It's obvious we need PBM reform in Mississippi. I hear you, but help me understand why the Mississippi Business Alliance and other business entities don't seem to feel that way. You can't just write them off and say they don't know what they're talking about. I just refuse to do that. I want to know more, is the point. Cut middlemen out and price goes down. Not necessarily. I know that seems to be the typical school of thought and certainly perception, but there is a value provided often by these aggregators, as I would call them. Jeez. Oh, well. The person that said, yeah, it's the ones that are fighting for voter IDs did come back and say, yeah, it's the ones who represent them. I should have stated that better, like Benny Thompson. That's 100% accurate. Jeremy England in the Element Wealth studio to Fox News and SuperTalk News.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays, live in the Element Wealth studio. Once again, don't forget, all-day remote day tomorrow in Columbus, Mississippi. That for the Bassmaster Elite Series. It's coming to town. And before we get out of here today, Rhino is going to give away some tickets to the Doobie Brothers. They're going to be at the Brandon Amphitheater on October 14th. Hang around. You don't want to miss that. But right now, it's Senator Jeremy England in the house, in the Element Wealth studio in the house. That's what the late, great Paul Gallo used to say all the time, in the house. Loved it. Right. It was awesome. Jeremy England, he's the Mississippi State Senator, represents District 51, serves as the chair of the Elections Committee, vice chair, Ports and Marine Resources. Senator, good to see you as always. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me on this afternoon, Gerard.
All right, so we're winding things down there at the Capitol, and I think it's been another one of those rather contentious sessions. I think is a fair way to describe it.
It has.
And there's been some disappointments. Something I hadn't said a lot about, Rhino. We've talked a lot about it when it was a live issue, but it is a dead issue. That's mobile sports betting is no longer going to happen. And
right.
I got to tell you, your colleague, Senator David Blunt, he chairs the gaming committee there in the Mississippi State Senate. I read his remarks and his rationale for opposing it. I disagree with those. I think he misses the idea that, this is entertainment. He said, well, it's not going to create a lot of money or jobs. It's not going to produce a lot of income for the state. Okay, I get that. Whereas casinos did, and therefore I supported that. Okay, I get that. But what about the people that just want to do it? I mean, can't we just let them have fun? We don't do that anymore.
Right. Well, we all like to have fun, right? Look, I very much respect Senator Blunt.
Sure.
He's put a lot of time and a lot of work into this. And I think the thing that we can't miss is there's two things with this mobile sports betting. There are studies coming out that show that this is a start for a problem for some people. Now, I know that we've got do we want to be a nanny state? And, of course, we don't, or at least in my opinion, we don't. But that's a concern for a lot of people. But also our brick-and-mortar casinos, are they ready? Are they on board? But the thing that we've had this year is this what is it? It's like chance betting or whatever the market is.
Prediction.
The prediction betting. And so we pretty much have it. That's legal and that's going on. So, what do we do? But what we don't want to see, what we're worried about seeing is the mobile slot machines, the mobile, card games and this and that in Mississippi, because we have people that have put a lot of time and effort to make sure we have a good destination marketing type gaming here in Mississippi, and we've thrived on that. And so I think that's a lot of the concern. But I do think mobile sports betting is coming, and the longer we put it off, we're just going to be one of the last few states that end up with it. And so I think we'll see it at some point if we get the right.
Well, it just seems like every year we get it started, we get excited, those that want to see this thing pass, and then the sales are deflated.
Yes.
And that's where we are again this year.
And look, from people my age and younger, it's one of the issues that I get text messages about all the time. Hey,
no doubt.
Hey, it's March Madness coming up. Can we not, or March Madness right now? Can we not? Can we not join the rest of the world that gets to do this?
And to your point about the prediction market products and those platforms, that is a hotly debated issue in Washington as to should this be regulated and who should regulate it, and to the extent it should be regulated, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission thinks they ought to have purview over it. So, complicated matter, but it's another example where technology is always racing ahead and government's lagging. Honestly.
That's right. And look, if people want it, we're not going to prevent them from doing it. We're just going to, the more laws we create, the more criminality we let get into it. But look, the folks want it and they're after it. So I hope we can get something across the finish line sooner rather than later. Probably not this year.
Yeah,
but we'll keep looking at it.
Something that you've been working on also. Known in the state of Mississippi, the legislation as the SHIELD Act.
That's right.
So you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. That's a good piece of legislation that we worked with the Secretary of State's office, Lieutenant Governor's office, the House. My House counterpart, Noah Sanford, he had a very similar bill. So it's a piece of legislation we worked on together. We passed it yesterday. We concurred with the House amendments yesterday, so that's headed to the governor's desk. It was a partisan vote. It's a partisan issue. But what the bill does is it says that all of our voter rolls annually in the state of Mississippi are to be run through the SAVE system. And I know you and I have said, well, why don't they quit using the word SAVE? They use it everywhere. This isn't the SAVE Act they're debating right now. What the SAVE system is the alien entitlement database that the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol uses to make sure that people are U.S. citizens. So by running our voter rolls through that, we're able to identify anybody that's registered to vote in Mississippi that may not be a U.S. citizen, and we get them off the voter rolls. And that's an important thing. We only want U.S. citizens voting here in our state. I don't think it happens very often. I'll be very clear on that. But that's one of those things that if it happens one time in an election, the integrity of our entire election system and the honesty and the validity is called into question. We can't have that with our elections. That's why it's such an important issue. Passed it yesterday. It's going to the governor's desk. So I'm glad to say that the SHIELD Act will be law here in Mississippi. We will have that extra check on our voter rolls to make sure U.S. citizens are only on our voter rolls.
So I did do a little research on this, Senator, and it occurred to me in that research that we actually have legislation already, law on the books, that would allow the Secretary of State to check. And this was passed several years ago. But when I talked to the Secretary of State, he indicated, and we didn't get deep into the discussion, that we needed this legislation to allow the Secretary of State to compare our voter rolls to this SAVE database. So what's going on there? How does this change what's already on the books?
So the law on the books says that when you go to DPS and you get a driver's license or you get an identification card, there's a box you check that says I'm not a U.S. citizen.
Right.
So if that flag came about and somebody showed up to register to vote, they would then automatically be run through SAVE. So we were already doing that part. And let me be clear, too, the SAVE, this federal database we're talking about using, it used to cost states money. It doesn't cost states money anymore. So we've got that, that's one reason why we said, let's go ahead and do it, But the Secretary of State's office was not required to run it through on an annual basis.
In bulk.
In bulk. The whole SIMS, State Elections Management System, which is where all registered voters are, all of our voter rolls, they're now going to be able to run that that through. And through working with the Secretary of State's office, the process is much smoother and much easier. That it's getting easier to do that. So it's just it's the right time to do it. Immigration and illegal immigration is a hot button topic. Like I mentioned a minute ago, this is a partisan issue. But look, this was supported by your Mississippi Republican women. They were a big help in getting it done. My friend Whitney Lipscomb was very big on helping draft and get this done. I've talked to many different conservative and Republican organizations that this was a piece of legislation they want to see. And look, other states were watching Mississippi on this because we stepped out and we took this. And so we've made a very good precedent on our elections law.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, by the way, it's systematic alien verification for entitlements.
That's right.
I think, and it as the name implies, it was really originally designed, and it's there for the states before, because states generally administer entitlement programs such as SNAP and Medicaid and TANF. Those are the three big ones. There's housing assistance, a couple of others, but the states generally administer those, even though it's mostly federal money. And the idea was when someone applies, only American citizens or those that have legal immigration status are eligible for these benefits. The idea was, okay, we'll go compare that identifying information to the federal SAVE database to ensure that they're, in fact, qualified, eligible for those benefits. That was the idea. So what you're saying is, under the current law, the Secretary of State could check a situation where somebody, and I can't even imagine anybody would do this and how often this happens, they go to get a driver's license and they check the box that says, I'm not an American citizen.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and if they do that, and look, mistakes would be made. Like there were some instances that they had flagged this last go around, and some of them were mistakes, and so they worked through that. And that's important to note that when there are mistakes, we catch them. Right. Okay. We're catching them, and we're getting into them. And I want to be clear too, because this was brought up on the floor yesterday. This is not in any way an attempt to disenfranchise anyone.
Sure.
And I told all of my Democrat colleagues that were, and everybody had concerns. I said, look, if we find that there's issues with this as we go forward, let's come back and look at it. Like, I'm always willing to talk and look at it, because that's not the intent. The intent is very clearly to make sure that only U.S. citizens are voting in the state of Mississippi. We've got this database that already says that they're U.S. citizens. And if there's a mistake made, you can get your birth certificate, you can get your information, you can bring it in, you can show, you can prove that you're a U.S. citizen. And I even talked to one of my Democrat colleagues recently. I said, well, let's maybe make it easier to get your birth certificate later on. Let's look at that next year, because if this is that important, we'll work on it, and we'll make it work. But it's a very good law, and I'm glad we got it off the floor.
Okay. We'll continue this discussion with Senator Jeremy England from the Element Wealth studio after the break. Stay with us.
If you're feeling anxious about...
Check it out. Let's do this. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with Senator Jeremy England. So just to kind of wrap this up, the SHIELD Act, it's sort of a microcosm of the SAVE Act at the federal level, very similar. And again, the big thing is, first, you got to prove you're a citizen in order to register to vote. Mm-hmm. But the second thing is, just for safekeeping, we're going to require the Secretary of State on an annual basis, right?
That's right.
We'll have to, in bulk, compare the State Election Management System, SIMS, the acronym for that. All those who are recorded in that system as registered voters, you'll simply have to compare and find their information in the federal SAVE database, which is kind of the system of record for all those in this country who are American citizens. That's right. And if it finds that they're not in that database as an American citizen, at that point they would be removed from the voter rolls. But further, the Secretary of State, you pointed this out, is going to be required to report such activity.
That's right.
Specifically to the legislature.
We get a yearly report from the Secretary of State that shows that is to tell us how many people were flagged and how many people were removed from the rolls. And like I mentioned to you off air a minute ago, I expect that number to be zero. Yeah. Almost all the time, and that's good. Yeah. And that just shows, hey, we've got the security measure. We're checking our voter rolls are where they need to be as far as citizenship.
No, I think that's good legislation. So, and I suspect most of the pushback you received on this kind of consistent with what we see at the national level from the Democrats.
Yes, it is. And look, they're concerned, and I don't disagree necessarily, but their argument, where my argument is, look, if we have one voter that's a non-citizen and votes in our election, it hurts the integrity. Sure. The opposite argument is, well, if a mistake's made and somebody is taken off the voter rolls when they should be allowed to vote, that's also a problem. Yeah. And I don't think that's incorrect, but it's just different concerns. This kind of tightens it up, but there are certain measures that you can do to go prove your citizenship. And it might take you a little bit, but you get it. And once Sims documents that you're a citizen, you shouldn't be flagged anymore. So if you have an issue with the federal system showing up and you prove that the federal system's incorrect, well, Sims, our state elections management system, will mark that, so the next year and going forward, you're marked as a citizen and you've been verified.
So if it does the comparison in subsequent years and it comes back with showing that this individual is not a citizen, okay, we already know there's a mistake in the database.
That's right.
At the federal level.
That's right.
Yeah, that works. That seems reasonable to me. So, yeah, the governor expected to sign that, I think. It's pretty common sense. I don't know if we'll get the same thing at the federal level. The Democrats are really standing in the gap on that with the filibuster. And the president says he's not signing off on any new legislation until he gets this one through. So
that's right. Yeah, look, we don't have that kind of quagmire here in Mississippi. We'll disagree. Like I said, this is a partisan vote. We'll disagree. We'll have our debate on it. But at the end of the day, I'm friends with everybody in that chamber and know their family and know them, and they're sacrificing their time away just like the rest of us are, and they're doing their job. They're representing their constituents, and we all have a good, deeply held respect. And I think that's important for your listeners to know that Mississippi is not operating as they do in Washington, because that's definitely something you can watch and get irritated at.
No doubt about it. Yeah. And it just seems like that there's a blockade going on for legislation and funding. We've been talking about that today for TSA, and that's causing all kinds of headaches and hassles for the American traveling public.
Right.
And there doesn't seem to be any end in sight, though there's some reports overnight that we're negotiating maybe a compromise here. So let's talk about this pharmacy benefit manager issue that is one that it seems like suddenly has been elevated to the hotly contested issue in the legislature. The bill, we've been talking about it all morning. The bill gets passed by the House, sent down to the Senate. The Senate includes a couple of amendments and then returns it to the House, for concurrence, and that's where it sits right now. You joined in with 6 other senators, as I recall, in opposition of the bill with the Senate amendments, which included the $11.29 filling fee, the dispensing fee. So explain your vote there, Senator.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. So HB 1665, as it came over, was a PBM reform bill. It did so many things that I think we need to do to help our independent pharmacists. It provided that pharmacies would be reimbursed at or above their acquisition costs of the drugs. I heard you talking about that earlier this morning. It will eliminate steering, so a PBM can't direct the plan beneficiaries to a certain pharmacy. That's out of there. They've got a good system for appealing different measures. They get their costs paid automatically. It gets rid of clawbacks. There's so many things, and those are good things. Those are things we need to do to help the independent pharmacists. And every time I hear them talk about what we need to happen, they mention those things as if they're completely contested by me and the ones that voted against this bill, and we're not. The only thing we're contesting, quite frankly, is this $11.29 dispensing fee that gets added on top of that, because that is absolutely going to cost our businesses and the state of Mississippi more money. I had a fiscal note that, and this is the thing, Gerard, we put facts out there and automatically they just, that's misinformation. That's incorrect. It's not. We've looked at it, and that's just an easy argument to make, and it is a very difficult issue, right? But it's going to cost the state $34 million, according to the numbers that were given to me, if we operate this. That's a $500 plus teacher pay raise if we had that money, we could do that. So there's a lot of things to look at. My biggest employers, I've got a large shipbuilder. A lot of the employees for that company live in my district. I represent them. They're going to see their cost of pharmaceuticals go up as much as $700 a year. And this isn't false information. We're adding an $11.29 dispensing fee, whereas they may have negotiated, like say they fill 2 million prescriptions a year, so they negotiate that down to a 10-15 cent dispensing fee, which sounds low, but it's in bulk. Well, when you add $11.29 to that, it's going to cost money. I haven't seen anybody tell me that this isn't doing it. We're told to look at other states, Gerard, and see what they're doing and that it's saving money. But I want to be clear that other states aren't necessarily going as far as we are on this. They're not all using a dispensing fee. Some of them are just taking Medicaid out of it, or adding that to Medicaid. And there's some states that have done a dispensing fee, and lo and behold, whatever they set the dispensing fee at the next year, the request is, hey, we've got to increase this dispensing fee. And all of that goes down to the end user, which is the person that I'm trying to make sure that we take care of. The person going and filling their prescriptions, it's going to cost them more money while inflation is what it is, while drug costs are going up in general, while healthcare costs are going up in general, while gas prices are going up. And we're going to do this right now. I just don't if we take that dispensing fee out of it, Gerard, we pass that bill right today. Everybody, probably unanimously. But the fight right now is to keep that in, and they're fighting so hard for it. I'm worried that the independent pharmacists are going to kill their own PBM reform bill fighting for that one extra point in the bill.
So what are they telling you as far as why they're so adamant that the dispensing fee needs to remain in the legislation?
Because they say that goes towards their cost of the bottles, and it goes towards the cost of paying their employees and other things. But, George, that's a cost of doing business. I don't know of any other business that we would even want to add fees for them straight out of whatever negotiated costs they've got on there. Our hardware stores, when Lowe's pop up in town, we didn't go add some sort of requirement that they get paid an extra amount of money because these other businesses are coming in and hurting them. Now, I sympathize with our independent pharmacists. I use an independent pharmacist. Well, my whole family does. I think they do a great job. I want to help them. That's why I wish the message that we could get out to them was, listen, abandon this dispensing fee argument, because that's where the problem with the business community is. That's where the problem is with a lot of people that are looking at this and saying this is going to cost the state a lot of money. Let that go, and we get a good PBM reform bill out, and we can come back and talk about it later if we need to. But we just keep going year after year because there's always one issue, and it's almost like it's non-negotiable, and that's just frustrating in the legislative process because you negotiate to get to a bill to get it out the door.
So overwhelmingly, however, this was supported in the Senate. Your Senate, even Republican colleagues, you and 6 others, dissented and voted no on it. But so did they not have the same concerns? Or I know you can't speak for them, but yes. Was there any discussion on the floor about that?
There was, and I think there is some folks that say, maybe we should have looked at this a little better. But here's the other thing. They most of them told me, listen, I'm hearing heavily from my independent pharmacists.
Okay.
I'm not hearing from anybody else.
Okay.
Well, I said, okay, well, they had the Mississippi Business Alliance. That's their representation. That's who does that. But I think there's also some issue fatigue behind this, and it's like, hey, let's pass something and get it done.
I agree. Deal fatigue happens in business too.
That's right.
No doubt. Well, I wasn't sure, but it seems like at this point, I don't know what the path is, but I was just talking about the possible options and outcomes, and I don't know if anything happens.
I don't know, but I'll say this: nobody in that building is pro PBM, and everybody is pro independent pharmacists. But we just want to get something done for them, Gerard.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, appreciate you coming in.
Hey, thanks for having me this afternoon.
Senator Jeremy England has been our guest. We're coming right back. We got some tickets to give away. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our shop
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
Well, I built me her raft and she's ready for flow. Oh, Mississippi, she's calling my name. Catfish are jumping, that paddle wheel bumping. Black water keep rolling on past just the same.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. All right, Rhino, we got some tickets to give away. Go.
Yeah, one of the best-selling bands of all time, the Doobie Brothers, are coming to Brandon later this year on October 14th, and you don't want to miss it. Tickets go on sale this Friday at the Brandon Amphitheater box office and at Ticketmaster.com. But we're giving you a chance to win a free pair of tickets to see the Doobie Brothers. All you got to do is be the 16th person to text us the words Blackwater to the C Spire text line. That's 601-879-4395. Be the 16th person to text the words Blackwater to the C Spire text line, and you'll win a free pair of tickets to see the Doobie Brothers at the Brandon Amphitheater on October the 14th.
Okay, I just want the folks to know we did not plan it that way, that you bumped us into the segment with the song.
Well, I did.
Okay. But I didn't tell you we were going to do it. We could have done it in the other segment. But nonetheless, it worked out perfect. Good job there. The Doobie Brothers, still a fan favorite for sure. On the C Spire text line, I get 6 prescriptions per month, and my cost is $0 per prescription. Would I now be charged $11.27 per med and under Medicare? I don't know. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that there are, is it fair to say, Rhino, multiple descriptions of that policy, that particular reform? I don't think there's a consensus, and that's what I'm calling for, is to somebody to help us understand exactly like this individual here would be a case that could be analyzed. What does this mean today? 0. What would it mean after this went into effect? Is that true or not? I don't know. And it'd be really helpful if we could get that information, again, to inform and form an opinion. So, looks like we got a winner, huh, Rhino? Awesome. So, also on the C Spire text line, talking about the SAVE database, the SAVE system, which stands for Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements. That is administered by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The question is, can it scan obituaries too, looking for possible folks who are deceased that are still listed, stored, recorded in the voter rolls? And the answer is no. That's supposed to be done down at the state and local level, and there are other sources for that information. The problem, as you know, Rhino, is they're supposed to be removing those deceased individuals that are listed and stored in those voter databases, but they don't. It's not habit. It's not routine. And as it should be, but I believe it should. And the Secretary of State, Michael Watson, and I agree with him, he has suggested a policy that would allow removal of someone who's just inactive. And there's a definition, I think, maybe having to vote in 3 of the last 4 presidential elections or something to that effect. I could be off a little bit there. But in general, if you're inactive, there's an assumption that, well, maybe you're still not residing within the state. That's a huge problem, as you know. People register in one state, they move to another, register there, and they just don't bother to call their county office and say, hey, look, I'm moving, please remove me from the voter rolls. And you end up with people that are registered multiple times in multiple states, and that becomes a problem when you don't have voter ID, and it's even a bigger problem in the 10 states that have all mail-in elections, something the president has insisted must end and has actually asked for that to be included in the measure known as the SAVE Act, which would require what we're doing here in the state of Mississippi with the SHIELD Act. Essentially, it replicates that, mirrors that on a nationwide level. Would be required in every state. Every state would have to process and compare and contrast their existing voter rolls on an annual basis at a minimum against the federal SAVE database, and that would be used to verify the immigration or citizenship status. In this case, it would be citizenship status for federal benefits, by the way. Some legal immigrants, even though they're not citizens, are eligible for those benefits, but not to vote. So in the case where the voter rolls in a particular state are, again, processed against, scrubbed against, compared to the SAVE database, in any situations where the system determines, that process determines that someone's listed as an eligible voter at the state and local level, but is, in fact, an illegal immigrant, they should be removed from the voter rolls. And as you heard the senator say, the Secretary of State is required to provide a report of such incidents, the details, on an annual basis to the legislature. That makes total sense to me. This is what the Democrats are fighting, so you'll know. You know, I thought about this, Rhino. I wonder if we could get the Democrats to agree, hey, let's just run the process and see what happens. Not necessarily remove, just see if they'd even just support that idea. Let's take all 50 states and let's scrub their voter rolls compare them against the SAVE database to give you a report. Because you know what they say, oh, they're non-registered. They don't vote. They're no illegal stored. And I do believe that in a state such as Mississippi, where we've had voter ID for a long time, where we have a little bit more rigorous application process, we probably won't have that many, if any. I don't know. But in a state like California or New York or Illinois, where they tend to look the other way and they're a lot more lenient, no, I think we will find some. Now, are they voting? I don't know. But couldn't we just at least run the exercise? You know, just as a test run, just so we can say, hey, look, these need to be addressed, Democrats. You're the ones that contend, oh, no, they're not out there. So it wouldn't remove them it wouldn't make permanent law. Let's just run it one time. Agree to run it one time. Here's your report. What say you? Because you said before we ran this report, oh, no, there's no need to do this. They're not out there.
They won't even do that because then the federal government under Trump for the next however long would have a list of all the illegals in their states.
That's true. That's a good point. And they would hand that off to ICE, right? Which would be the appropriate thing to do.
Unless you're a bleeding heart blowhard that votes Democrat.
Man, oh man. Again, paying deference to illegals over American citizens, just as they do with bona fide criminals over victims of crime. They prioritize the criminals and they vilify the victims of the crimes the criminals commit. They get some sort of perverse, crazy satisfaction out of that. I don't know if that's appealing to their base. I guess it is. They seem to feel like that is politically expedient on their part. I disagree. Man, oh man. I'm a sportsbook bettor on the C Spire text line. I would love to have it available online, but I don't drive to Philadelphia to place a bet for a single game. You can do that now. That's the point here from the person who sent us this message. You can legally engage in sports betting in Mississippi. You just have to be on a casino property. It's geo-fenced. I do drive to Philadelphia to play golf and poker, and they happen to have a sports book. Absolutely right. Appreciate that message.
I think what he's trying to say is the sports book is not the destination.
Oh, completely agree. And I would also argue it's a different player. We found that out about the lottery. There were some concerns that, hey, the lottery may siphon some business away from the casinos. That's absolutely not the case. It's a different player with a different mindset that just happens to find that to be entertaining. And there's some people that sit in front of a slot machine for hours, find that to be entertaining. Or the sports book. Yeah, I just think it's different strokes for different folks. And it's entertainment. You can't deny that's what its purpose is. And people are doing it now, except it's leaking. We're not getting any money from it. I disagree with Senator Blunt saying, well, we shouldn't do this because it's only going to produce this much money and it's not going to produce that many jobs. That's not even the purpose. That's not the point. It's not for economic development. That's kind of the way he made it sound. Casinos, yeah, you could argue that was an industry for economic development. This is entertainment.
People like Blunt will twist themselves into knots to keep from doing something that makes sense.
And that's exactly what it sounded like. I just couldn't believe that was his rationale.
Oh, it's not his rationale. It's just what he thinks people will buy.
That's probably true. We are coming right back in the Element Well studio. We did get a winner for our Doobie Brothers tickets. We appreciate you playing. Stay with us.
Jackson Hewitt has
properly set all controls before recording.
all systems go. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
2, 3, 4.
So over the weekend, as the Senate continues to debate the SAVE Act, doesn't look like it's going anywhere at this point. Senator Tommy Tuberville was the primary sponsor of an amendment to the bill. This was at the request of the president that would just simply prohibit males from playing in women's sports when there's government funding involved in supporting those sports. And the Democrats, no surprise, Rhino, voted against this measure. How do they do that with a straight face? How do they vote against something that seems, in my view, so straightforward, so common sense? You sent me, can you explain that to the people? You showed me a video last week. What was the specific athletic competition that video featured, showing a fairly bulked up transgender? Am I describing that right? Was it like a tug of war or something like that you showed me?
I don't remember showing you that. I showed you a video of a foot race. It was like 100-meter.
I remember that
race featuring college athletes that were women, and a random dude put on a wig and stole his sister's ID and entered the race and beat them all handily.
Yeah. You know what I'm thinking about? It was a very bulked up, legitimate female that was competing. I can't remember what the event was exactly, against a transgender. And the transgender just wiped the floor with him. It just illustrated that
there was a battle of the sexes tug of war.
That's what it was.
It was 3 female bodybuilders versus, I think it was just normal dudes again.
Okay. But, yeah, the bodybuilders were buffed. I mean, they truly were.
Diesel burning women.
But they got killed. I mean, It wasn't even close, honestly. And it wasn't like that the males on the other end were like buffed males.
No.
Right? They were just your normal off-the-street guys. So we're not surprised at this, but the Democrats say that doesn't make a difference, right? So
it's because they live in La La Land.
Jeez. But the Senate Democrats, they voted Saturday to defeat this Republican amendment that would have prohibited transgender athletes from participating in girls or women's sports. It's just incredible. 49-41. Along party lines, Senators Tuberville and Marsha Blackburn sponsored this particular measure. Something else related to the state of Mississippi that's happening in Washington related to voting in elections. Looks like the Supreme Court is pretty dang close to rejecting our law here in the state of Mississippi that allows ballots to be counted after Election Day, provided they were postmarked on Election Day, within 5 business days after the election. Looks like they're going to say, nope, you can't do that. So I think the plaintiffs, if I got this right, Rhino, were the state Republican Party, the National Republican Party, and I think there's Libertarian Individual or Libertarian Party involved in that as well. Spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, which brought the case, said it's really a simple principle. Ballots must be received by Election Day. She added that a strict ballot reception deadline prevents elections from dragging on for days and weeks after voters have cast their ballots. That causes confusion, I agree, and undermines elections. I did say that could be a problem if the Supreme Court rules the way it looks like they are for Alaska, because Alaska has problems just transporting their ballots with respect to the weather and so forth. It's obviously a very sparsely populated state. A lot of people live in wildernesses, travel a long way to vote. So there's concerns about getting that there, literally, from the close of the polls on Election Day to the end of day Election Day. And
but then you got people in Alaska that say a lot of those issues are overblown by politicians.
Okay.
And that people that actually live in Alaska have to deal with all of that on a daily basis, and it's nothing new for them.
No doubt about it. They're adept at that. I totally agree. So I'm just reporting what some of what I've seen is. I didn't get to it today. I will tomorrow. But, oh, man, there's some folks that are celebrating up in Illinois, Sangamon County, Illinois, because a Cyrus 1 data center, the approval for such in the county was postponed and was laid on the table, delayed. 1.5 million square foot facility. 700 people showed up to protest. This is crazy. Of course, they all go to social media to protest the data centers. They're using data centers once again to do their protesting. Unbelievable. Out of here today, Columbus tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.